Well, the MP for Grantham and Stamford is Nick Boles, who's been pushing a Brexit plan of his own. I sat down with him and started by asking him if he's going to be backing the Prime Minister's deal.
It's not a perfect deal. I've had severe reservations about it in the past, particularly the earlier version, which was going to carve Northern Ireland out into a separate customs territory. That's not something that I think I would have been able to vote for. But actually, I do think that the latest version is a big improvement on that. And of course there are flaws, of course there are things about it that I don't much like, but I certainly think that it is better than no deal. We do need to leave the EU, in my view, so I will be voting for it.
You say that you have some concerns about it. I mean, those concerns are pretty widely shared with lots of people in Parliament, aren't they? I mean, the DUP, for example, is saying that they don't like the fact that Northern Ireland will, in their view, be treated differently to the rest of the UK under the backstop. Others are unhappy with the kind of close links to the EU, or the fact that they think that the future relationship is too flimsy. I mean, these are some real serious concerns, aren't they?
No, there are very serious concerns, and it is quite hard at this point to see how the Prime Minister wins, because in a sense it's got into that terrible position where lots of people hate it for entirely different reasons, and that's not a very good place to be if you're trying to win a majority in a house where you don't have a permanent majority.
I mean, it's going to be difficult, isn't it? Around 100 Conservative MPs have expressed opposition to the deal. I mean, there's no way she's going to get this through Parliament, is there?
I think it's very unlikely that she's going to win. It's not completely impossible. I think that there has been growing support, I believe, in the country for the Prime Minister. She's actually been performing probably at her best in the last few weeks, and I think there's a lot of public sympathy for the way that she just keeps on going with all of these people attacking her from all sides.
At the same time, though, a few weeks, not very long. I mean, it's a bit too late, isn't it?
I think that's the problem in a way. I think it is probably too late to turn it around. If in a sense the deal had been announced a couple of months ago and she'd had the full 2 months to talk to MPs individually, to understand their concerns, to try and find ways to address them, maybe she could have pulled it round. But as it is, I fear she's not going to, that she is going to lose. And then the question is, what's next?
Well, that is the question. You have got a plan B, haven't you? Just talk us through what that is.
Well, I think the most important thing about my plan B is that it's nobody's plan A. This is not a perfect deal that I'm proposing, but it is one that is doable. What I'm suggesting is that we should move into a position a bit like Norway's, where we're in the common market that binds Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein with the EU. It's called the European Economic Area. And we join something called the European Free Trade Association. And we go into a temporary customs union with the EU until we find new arrangements that satisfy the border requirements to the satisfaction of the Republic of Ireland and the EU. So we'd be in the single market in a temporary customs union, but we'd be outside lots of things that we don't like about the EU. We'd be outside the common agricultural and fisheries policies, we'd be outside the European Court of Justice, and we'd be outside all of the political stuff of the EU. So we'd be, in a weird way, going back to the common market that we joined, decades ago, that was about trade and about economic integration, and we would no longer be bound by this sort of drive towards ever closer union that the rest of the EU is so committed to.
I mean, there is one big problem with your plan, though, isn't there? And that's immigration, because if you do go down the Norway route, you have to accept free movement of people. I mean, that really is the Prime Minister's biggest red line of all.
Yeah, the one big downside, there's no avoiding it, of the Norway option is that freedom of movement still applies. Now, for many people, including many people in my constituency, and I'm very aware of that, the desire to control immigration was one of the key motivations of their vote to leave. On the other hand, the level of migration from the EU is now at its lowest level since 2012. Just last week we had the latest figures. And we also find in opinion polls that concern about immigration has also subsided quite fast.
But is that because they think that free movement is going to end, perhaps?
Well, maybe it is, or maybe it's because they've seen that it is actually much less of an issue than it was. And there is one thing about the European Economic Area, about the Norway position, which is that we would have this legal remedy which is an emergency brake, which is that if you have events that are causing serious economic or societal difficulties, is the way it's put, then you can suspend one of the four freedoms, the freedom of movement, for a period in order to bring it under control. Now, nobody's used it, and we don't exactly know what it would deliver, but it isn't available to us as a member of the EU, and it would be available to us as a member of the EEA.
Theresa May has said that this is not an option, that Norway is not going to happen.
The Prime Minister is particularly focused on immigration. This has been true of her, in a sense, throughout her time in government as Home Secretary and then as Prime Minister. And so it's no surprise, I think, to anyone that she objects fundamentally to the fact that the Norway option does not control immigration in the way that she'd like. But I'm only proposing this in the context where her deal has been defeated. And that's quite likely to happen in 10 days' time. Now, the question is, what else is there out there? And the real truth is this: there is no other option that the EU would support that could win a majority in Parliament and get us out of the European Union on the 29th of March. And for me, that's the overwhelming priority.
And are you confident it could get through Parliament then? Are you having those conversations?
Yes, over the last couple of months, I've been seeking out people and all parties, Labour Party, the SNP, Plaid Cymru, the DUP, Liberal Democrats, as well as Conservatives. And just in recent weeks, people have been seeking me out. And that ranges from many members of the cabinet to leaders of some of the other parties. And it's because they all see that at the moment we might be heading off the cliff. We're going to do a Thelma Louise and drive straight off the cliff into the sunset. And that's not something that almost anyone really wants to see. And they do see the potential of the Norway option to get us out of the EU and avoid no deal.
So how many members of the cabinet are you talking about then?
Well, I've spoken to probably now 6 or 8 members of the cabinet. I don't want to say that they're all completely signed up to this as a plan B. I mean, of course, they're all supporting the Prime Minister's plan first and foremost. Some of them are very committed to it. Amber Rudd has been very clear before she went back into the cabinet that this was her preferred fallback option. Others, are thinking it over. But what is true of everyone is that they're all looking for that realistic, doable, negotiable, deliverable Brexit deal. And there aren't any others if the Prime Minister's deal is defeated.
Just taking a step back from the kind of intricacies of the options on the table, you represent a seat that for many people is almost synonymous with conservatism. It's where Margaret Thatcher was born. Are you worried about the Conservative Party image at the minute with all of this rows over Brexit?
Well, there's no question the Conservative Party is not a happy family at the moment, and we're not behaving in a particularly adult or harmonious fashion. And Margaret Thatcher would be, ticking us all off no end, I'm sure, for that. The key thing is that we need to be able to get beyond it, and soon. That's why I think a second referendum would be so disastrous, because the whole country would carry on arguing about this, and in families and in workplaces, people would be falling out with each other as we went through the whole argument all over again.
Do you agree with your colleagues who say that after Brexit is, they hope, done next year, it's time for Theresa May to hand over to a new generation of Conservatives?
I think we're definitely going to need to have fresh faces, new ideas and new leadership before the next election. I think it should be up to Theresa May to decide precisely when she wants to hand over. My own view would be that it can't be just before the next election. There needs to be a decent period for someone to be able to demonstrate what their new approach and their new ideas would deliver for the British people. So I hope that she would see mission completed on the 29th of March as the time to start thinking about when it is that she wants to hand over to a successor.
Thank you very much.